So you have a message, you get to a landing page, you get to the product, and it's either too generic or too watered down and unspecific, or it's just not clear what the benefits are. What's the upside of this? And it's almost like we help your team communicate better. Okay, but I already use Slack. So that's it, I'm not interested. But don't you want to try and find out how we can help your team communicate better? No. But it's such a great tool. Why? Because you said you're going to help me communicate better? Like people are not sitting there lapping up, waiting to eagerly learn how to use another complex tool, go through a payment gateway, go through a complex funnel, have to pull in a long onboarding. It's like, we don't want to buy more software. We don't want more complexity in life. We want to reduce complexity. So your message has to really kill. It has to really cut through. And the only way to do that is to be hyper-specific, hyper-relevant. And you need to be creative. It has to be interesting or unusual.
Oren, so it's great to have you on the show. I've been seeing you a lot on my LinkedIn feed lately. I'm sure that's something you can definitely help a lot of founders with. So Oren is a B2B SaaS marketing expert, help from different corporates. He founded the Curve agency, worked with over 6 public companies and 100 startups, dealing with tens of millions of revenue. So Oren, great to have you on the show. How about if you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm a marketing advisor for SaaS CEOs of varying businesses. I've worked with, as you mentioned, about 6 different public companies. I think the largest, the revenue was actually about 32 billion annual. So a bit more than tens of millions. But I'd say, yeah, my average client has probably tens of millions and hundreds of millions of revenue. So kind of a bit on the smaller side of that. I've been doing it for about 20 plus years now, working with startups and scale-ups predominantly. My career started in VC-backed businesses. I only work with tech companies, so kind of trendsetters, innovators, across lots of different subsectors, HR tech, fintech, martech. I've done e-commerce, electronic manufacturers. So I've done lots of different industries now.
It sounds like you have a lot of experience and we're going to learn a lot from it. So in this episode, I know you wanted to focus on product market fit. And I talked about it from, I come from a product background. So I was like, oh, wait, isn't this a little bit more product? But then you added in some layers of how you approach it from the marketing side. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I think the problem with product market fit is, first of all, it's quite binary. Like you either have it or you don't have it. In reality, it's more like of a spectrum of growth. I also think that you can't just take product market fit in isolation, because what that assumes is you're creating a product and then you're trying to fit the product into a market. And so I've seen this like 14 times now, where someone builds a product, they come to me, they're Oren, we built this product. Like, great, go sell it. Who to? Well, we don't know. You go find the market for it. And I'm like, it's usually the other way around. You usually kind of see a problem and you try and solve the problem. You build the product to solve the problem. But other people, they're playing around with technology or innovating, and they think this is cool or interesting, or they build something to solve their very niche use case and it doesn't really fly. Then they go to market and then they realize there's actually a lot more to it than that. It's not just about the fact that it's more market product fit than product market fit, but also there's these other key pillars. So there's like message fit, there's audience fit, there's channel fit. So when you put it all together, you kind of get product, market, message, audience, channel. And if you think about any of those pillars, if you get any of those wrong, you're not going to get a result, right? I think the reason people kind of hone into product market fit or message audience fit, there's all these, every function in marketing has its own fit variant, content audience fit, paid performance marketer will say channel audience fit, right? So you got lots of different perspectives because marketing is so fragmented. You've got like about 48 different sub-specializations in sort of job titles. So if you think like lead generation, demand generation, content marketing, affiliate marketing, performance marketing, SEO, etc. And all of those could be bundled to about 24 roughly categories. So it's a very fragmented space with lots of different perspectives. And also someone working in a small business isn't the same as working in a large corporate. And someone who's targeting B2B is not the same as someone working B2C, right? And then someone who's targeting like annual contract value of 500K a year client type is not the same as someone targeting 500 a year, right? Everything is different in the messaging, the funnel, the acquisition channel, the motion, right? if it's product-led growth or sales-led growth. So that's where it goes wrong. It's essentially a bucket with lots of holes in it. People think of it, they like to reduce it because it's complex. So the heuristics, we reduce complexity into one big hole. We're going to go, if we just plug that hole, we've got a successful business. And the reality is it's actually all these little holes that kill you, because the water just kind of sifts and then you're like, where's all the water gone? In this case, the water tends to be the money you've raised from friends, family, and VCs. And when that water's gone, it's very hard to get more water if you haven't got a result that was defined with what was agreed originally. And that's a problem. I think a lot of businesses, they're running out of fuel before they get the result. And it's very stressful. It's very disheartening. Founders, they put their heart and soul into building a business. They're really eager to be successful. They have people who are dependent on them, with their own family or its employees in the business that are bought into this vision. So I think founders and CEOs, they feel a lot of pressure, and then they get a lot of like slack on social. But I think very few people understand or can relate to how hard that journey is until you've actually experienced it.
It sounds like there are definitely a lot of ways to have that water drip out. What can a founder do to build a healthy bucket? How would I call that in this example?
Yeah, I think there's really only three answers to this. The first is you keep trying stuff until you figure out what works. This is, I'd say, the high risk category. The second category is you read a lot and absorb a lot of information, and that's probably what most, I think pretty much all of them do it. The problem is when you're reading stuff, you read stuff that's conflicting, or you read stuff that's for a use case that's not applicable. Because if you're reading an article about sales-led growth, and you're like, this is amazing, we should totally hire a whole team of sales development reps like this book recommends and drive growth. And then you realize, wait a second, our annual contract value is only like $250 a year per customer. It's not economically viable for us to go with a sales-led growth motion. But you didn't think about that until 3 months in, when you've hired all these SDRs, went to market, and suddenly the numbers don't stack up. So that's the problem with the second bucket. And that's probably what all good, smart CEOs and founders do. And then the third is you bring in experts, which is obviously all you're really doing there is de-risking and trying to shorten the timeline to achieve the result. Even that is very problematic because you have lots of experts, right? It's essentially a non-regulated industry. You have lots of people with different opinions, and sometimes you have 5 different advisors telling you 5 different things. So there is no real answer that's like the golden nugget or the silver bullet. I think it's really a trial and error game. And I think the biggest variable that no one likes to talk about and no one's comfortable with is luck. And the reality is luck plays a disproportionate factor. And the only issue is if you don't do anything, you're not going to get lucky. So all you can do is do lots of stuff and hope to get lucky. So velocity is very important, right? Experimental velocity. So being very lean and being very fast is really critical, I think, for startup life.
So if we're talking about being lean and moving fast, what would the month-to-month look like? What would an experiment look like? Would I start with content audience fit? Would I start with product market fit? How would you go about doing that?
Yeah. I think you always start with audience. You always need to really understand the problem that the audience has. I really think in simple terms, in jobs to be done. What is a specific functional utility that the product that you've built is solving, and which audience is it going to solve it for? And then you really need to go down into the channel level, because you can't reach that audience in a relevant need state where they are actively looking or interested in engaging with this problem or challenge that you have, then you're not going to be able to get their interest. And then you really need to narrow into the message and making sure your message is right. And the truth is, if you get the right message for the right audience, and like one channel is like a perfect channel where it's like, 8 out of 10 times you're hitting the right person. And then the other channel is only like 4 out of 10 times you're hitting the right person, you're still going to get a result because you're still hitting 4 out of 10. The problem happens is when, you're broadcasting and completely wrong. Like I'll give you an example. Audit for a business recently, and CEO was like, let's up the spend. Okay, up the spend on display on Google. Okay, why? Listen, we're behind target. We have to get a result. Okay. Should we look at the targeting? Who are we targeting? why don't you just spend the money? Give me a second. I just want to validate this. Go check the audiences, and they're selling to B2B businesses, and all the default audiences in Google ads were set to consumer audiences. Okay, so yeah, we can go burn the money if you want us to just burn money for the sake of burning money. So you feel like people are seeing the brand. But the reality is, with hundreds of millions of people, you don't have the marketing budget to reach everyone over a long enough time period to be top of mind when they happen to be in market for your solution. And it's just too expensive because it's a bidding model. So whoever's monetizing most effectively on the bidding model is going to dominate the majority of that real estate. And it's just too fragmented. I mean, how fragmented is it? Well, just look at the revenue that Google makes every year. And that's kind of the budget you'd need in order to make it work. And unless you have billions, literally, to spend on marketing, you're not going to be able to achieve it with this mindset. So what you need to do is you need to niche. Okay. But then niching is where the complexity is. The right message for the right audience in the right channel, in the right funnel, in the right journey, with the right product that meets the need that they have at that time. And I'd say it's that last bit that I said, that's the biggest problem for the majority of businesses, is they simply cannot discern. They literally do not have the option to identify who is the ideal prospect at the right time. That's really the crux of it. And what marketing has become, because of privacy laws, because of the bidding model, is that there's this massive wastage. People are advertising. They don't know how many people are seeing what they're selling. And it's that wastage that's actually killing that business. It's killing their ability to drive a result. A lot of businesses, they have built in like products that meet a need of some sort. And yeah, obviously it's not always like a 10 out of 10, I've got a headache, I need an aspirin. Well, that's probably like, I don't know, 4 out of 10 of like cancer, and, it's 10 out of 10, like life threatening. So yeah, maybe they're not like 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, but like functionally, even at 4 or out of 10 or 5 out of 10, you're a good enough place that you can have a sustainable business, a healthy business. And the problem is there's so much wastage in trying to find that 4 out of 10, that right audience that have that problem, that they run out of juice. So I've seen that I'd say like insane amounts of money wasted on this. Like the last one I audited was about 4.8 million spent. And the target cost of customer acquisition, the customer was worth, I think, like 15K a year. And the total cost of acquiring a customer came to 280,000. So it would take them, I can't remember, I calculated the payback window. I think it was like 79 years to get back the cash just to break even. And, a good payback window is about 12 to 18 months. So it's like the probability of that business ever succeeding is 0.00000, I don't know, distance to the sun multiplied by 10, very unlikely.
So that's insane. So I'm trying to figure out how we can be a little bit more efficient. So let's say I'm a founder, I decide on LinkedIn and I want to figure out how to reach content audience fit. So what would a good plan in your mind look like? Would it be week number 1 or month number 1? Here is the message. Here's my ICP. And here's my content for the upcoming month. What would that look like basically?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about your ideal customer profile, your ICP, I think the problem is people think they know their ICP and they don't. So really the biggest thing that I see that companies miss is they skip the qualitative or quantitative research phase, and they work with a lot of assumption. And I think the reason for that is like there's an excitement about getting your message out there, and there's a belief that because you solve a meaningful problem, if you just get it out there, it's going to work. And what happens is I think it's a lack of understanding of just how much spam and noise we're all up against every day. Like how many cold outbound emails do we receive? How many messages on LinkedIn do we see? How many requests are we getting for our time and our energy? And when you look at it, the average day, we're bombarded with so much stuff that's requesting something from us that you really need to lead with value. And most people, they just kind of forget to lead with value because they're like, well, I'm solving a meaningful problem for you. Why do I need to convince you to try it if I'm trying to solve you a meaningful problem? And it's like, well, because I don't know you, I don't like you, and I don't trust you. And if I don't know you, like you, and trust you, I'm not going to buy from you. And it's that simple. And you kind of go, it's a really simple like mental test. So if you said, okay, I'm going to give you a category right now, there's 285 solutions in the category. And I ask everyone the same question. I say, give me 2 names of companies in the category. Everyone always gives me the same 2 names. And the question and the category is, give me 2 brands in CRM. Go. Who would you say?
I'm guessing HubSpot and Salesforce.
HubSpot and Salesforce. Why? There's 285 players. No one knows there's 285 players in that category. And you kind of go, why is it? Because they're well known. There's trust there. They become a brand. They're established. They have credibility. You know what to expect when you buy from them. Just like you know what to expect when you go to a 5-star hotel or when you're going to McDonald's. The expectation is set. If you're an unknown brand, the expectation is not set. So a lot of the problem that these startups have or early stage businesses, they don't have a brand. They aren't trusted. They aren't known. And that's a massive issue. And it's much easier to build brands with a smaller audience. So you really want to go a niche. So first of all, what you don't want to do is have a broad ICP. Don't have a broad definition. And I see a very broad definition. I had one the other day. Every small business in the UK is a target audience, right? The same for agricultural firms and the same for architectural firms. Wait, actually, now that you said it, no, we're not good. Okay, so you're not for every small business in the UK then. Oh, wait, you're right, we're not. And then it's like that niching, and no one wants to niche. That's the problem. We're resistant to the opportunity cost. We're like, if we niche, we're losing all the opportunity. But the reality is 0 multiplied by 0 is still 0. And the fear is instinctual, it's biological, but people aren't aware of it. It's a kind of uncomfortable. So first of all, you got to really nail it in terms of your hypothesis. You've got to be very specific and really you got to do research. And if you have customers, and some of these businesses I work with, they have customers and only a chunk of their customers are the ideal customer profile. Like the client the other day had like 200 customers, but only like 12 customers are really the type of customer they want. So, okay, let's hone in. What are the characteristics of these 12? Really narrow down who they are. Their firmographic, technographic, the demographic, everything you need to know about them, map it. Where they live, what they consume, how they think, what's the size, what's the industry, everything. So you need to really nail your profile and like that honing in. And then you've got to really understand their buyer's journey. When in their journey as a business, do they really need your solution? All right. So a lot of this is like customer research led. It's, and you can use, ChatGPT to produce some of this. Like you can use synthetic data, but it's not ideal. Like ideally you talk to either customers first, your sales second, and then synthetic data the third. And then I'd say leadership. And people really don't like this. I was like, wait a second, you're saying synthetic data is more attuned to what's happening in the business and the leadership in that business? I say, yeah, because if business is not actively talking to customers, they're not actively on sales calls, they don't really understand what they think. They have hypotheses and ideas, but there's what I see is there's a big gap, especially when you go like a board meeting. You're on a board meeting, someone has an idea, they're very smart and clever, but they're very far removed from what's actually happening in the ground. They don't know. They can't see the creative. They don't see the landing pages. They don't see the funnel. They're not in the CRM. They can't put it together. And they just have a very broad, gross hypothesis or idea. And it's like, okay, you can go spend 3 months on doing that. But if the data is telling you to go in a different direction, why would you go do it? And that's like a big point of tension that kills a lot of these businesses. It's the disconnect in how we're going to attack it, how we go to different paths. So practically, how do you go about doing it? So once you've done the research and you kind of nailed your ICP, you kind of have a good understanding of the jobs to be done. You then have to come up with different angles or positions of how to communicate a message that ties to those pain points. So you really need to understand the pain points to create compelling, interesting messaging. I think what happens here that goes terribly wrong is multiple levels. I think the first is people end up in marketing speak. It's like this polished, nice sentence that sounds really like what is it? Like, I can literally, if I open up Zoom or Salesforce or Slack and I look in the homepage and the title and I'll read it to you, then I'll ask you which company is it? You'd have no idea which company it is. It's so non-specific that you'd have zero idea. I think the only one who did it recently that was good was Dropbox. Dropbox have, like, if you're not sure, go check out Dropbox's homepage. They just go, we're trusted by over 800 million people. I can't remember, like in a staggering number, 850 million people use Dropbox. And Dropbox is used for storage and sharing files and something else. It's just like, if you read that and you didn't know which brand it was, you'd know, okay, that's Dropbox. And they were the only one, even at their scale of 2.5 billion revenue, that nail the message and don't assume like this marketing speak bullshit. So I think that's like the first issue with the message. The second is who writes the message? And they give it to a copywriter. Copywriter, go come up with something funny or creative. And it's like, great, sounds good. Just slap it on. It's like, right. Does a customer know what that message means? What do you mean? What did you ask? Did you do a survey with the customers to see how they interpret the meaning of this and how it ties to your problem or solution? Why would we do that? The copywriter understands our business. Yeah, the copywriter does, but the copywriter is not your target audience. And it's like, you can't mentally adapt your mindset unless you are your target audience. And some businesses, they're lucky enough to be selling the dog food that they eat because they happen to be dogs. And that's great when you're creating dog food and you're a dog. But most businesses aren't dogs eating their own dog food. They're selling dog food to cats. And if you're a dog and you're selling to a cat, it's going to be very hard for you to understand how a cat thinks because dogs aren't like cats, even though they're both fluffy and have 4 limbs and cost a lot of money with veterinary bills. So the last thing with the message is how the message ties into the journey. There has to be a connect, and usually it's disconnected. So you have a message, you get to a landing page, you get to the product. You're like, they're not homogenous. They're not tied together, but they're not sequential either. And it's either too generic or too watered down and unspecific, or it's just not clear what the benefits are. What's the upside of this? And it's almost like we help your team communicate better. Okay, but I already use Slack. So that's it. I'm not interested. It was that simple. It's like, people aren't complex. It's just like, you said a generic thing. It's like, but don't you want to try and find out how we can help your team communicate better? No. Oh, but it's such a great tool. Why? Because you said you're going to help me communicate better. Like, this is what people are like. Like, people are not like sitting there lapping up, waiting to eagerly learn how to use another complex tool, go through a payment gateway, go through a complex funnel, have to fill in a long onboarding. It's like, we don't want to buy more software. We don't want more complexity in life. We want to reduce complexity. So your message has to really kill. It has to really cut through. And the only way to do that is to be hyper specific, hyper relevant. And you need to be, you have to be creative. It has to be interesting or unusual. You have to get the message across. And I think this is the hardest part, because this directional principle of being differentiated, of being creative, there is no playbook that shows you how to do it. It's a journey of experimentation to figure out how to do it. And there's a lot of different ways and best practices to do it. If you're, you lead with a lead bank, like a micro offer, and the micro offer takes you into something like, you get a cold email that says, it's a cost per acquisition CPA basis. We don't pay until we get you a conversion. And you can go, okay, you've de-risked me. Maybe I'll try it out. You see? And that's like one way of it. Another would be, I'm going to give you a free audit. And say, okay, well, I'm getting something of value. And I think the biggest problem is when people send their message into the market, they think that if they have a message that articulates the problem they solve and what they do, that people care. And that's not the right thinking. The right thinking is, are people willing to pay for what you're going to give them for free in order to experience and try out your offer, your product? And if you think in that lens, suddenly you're like, whoa, this is going to be very expensive for me. I need to produce something that has value, and I'm giving away this for free intrinsically just to get someone to have an opportunity to give them a taster of my product. Yeah. Whoa, I can't afford to do that. You can't if you have a broad ICP, but if you've nailed your economics of acquisition, you know what customer's worth, and you know it's going to cost you a third to acquire them, and you can do that within that remit, then now you've got an interesting funnel. Now you have a probability. I think what people think marketing is like broadcasting messages. And I don't think that's what marketing is anymore. I think what marketing is delivering micro value in the journey that adds up to get that conversion through, to warming them up. Essentially, marketing is like a microwave. You put in a freezing cold dish, you put the timer on, and what's happening is you're incrementally increasing it. And it's that incremental warming of creating engagement, creating awareness, creating likability, creating trust, creating value that gets someone to then try and convert. And the little businesses, they don't do that. Just go very generic, very watered down, very non-specific. So yeah, that's like top of mind. Some of the key challenges or issues with how to go about just thinking with getting your message into the market and getting traction there.
I like the microwave example a lot. And I think doing it this way also, like a lot of founders out there are like, okay, let's get our website up. Let's make it look good. Let's put on this generic message, right? So I think they're not familiar with all of these concepts that you're talking about, but even if they were familiar with it, it's kind of like, I don't have the time to do that. Let's get an expert. It's very, very hard to do what you're describing, but there is no other way. So the next thing I'd like to ask you about is maybe you can give me an example or two of startups that you've worked with, and then the before and the after. Right? But the before, they're like banging their head against the wall, generic message, and then how you went about finding that product market fit.
Yeah, got it. Wow, so many examples and so many failures as well. So I don't want to pretend as if,
I like that.
yeah, as if I get like a 5 out of 5 hit rate here. Like I really don't. I think it's
It
really
never
hard.
happens.
Yeah, it never happens. And I think I don't know what my success rate is, but if I was to estimate, I'd probably say 20 to 30%. And I've been doing this for 20 years. And like, I'm not trying to like say this in a point of like, oh, I thought this guy knows everything. Why should I be listening to him? And say, if you don't want to listen to me, that's fine. But I guess my point is with saying it is how hard it is. The point is that it's really hard. And I think a lot of people who are selling marketing and sales, they're pretending that they have these magical playbooks that are guaranteed to get a result. And I think there's like just a lot of charlatans. And I think it's quite tragic that that's happening, because founders are putting in their soul into building the business and they're relying on this person to come help them. And then the person is just like transactionally trying to extract money from them rather than trying to really help them solve a problem. They're not really interested in solving the problem. And I think what happens typically with like people who are running young, who are quite young and running agencies, and they think that they'll be able to build a successful business by selling and closing a deal. And if they just continue getting that, but the reality is they find that you really need great word of mouth in any business that's B2B. And like the social proof is really critical. The case study is a testimonial. And what happens is what's really hard is acquiring customers is very expensive. It's really, really hard. And that's the problem here. So I kind of say, because I think there's just like too much fluff and bullshit in people talking about their success stories on LinkedIn and making themselves sound incredible. And I do that too. I mean, I've got my testimonials and I've got my case studies and I talk about my successes. You don't see any page of me talking publicly. If you do read my LinkedIn posts, I do openly share my failure. And that's probably why I've got like 32,000 followers. It's because I'm not part of this show. But people aren't openly talking about their failures. I think it's actually quite tragic that's happening, because there's so much to learn. Kind of, because there's way more ways to go wrong than going right. And you can spend a lot of time reading about all the ways to go wrong. You're probably better reading about ways to go right. And I think there is a reason for that. And so one example, come to think about it, this business was incubated, it was a subsidiary of a FTSE 100 business. We had a team of about 20, 25 people, really smart team. And they were struggling for about, I think, 7 or 8 months until the CEO brought me in. And it was tense. It was tense because they were really behind target. The head of growth was under a lot of pressure. And it was a mobile app that allows you to talk to like a repair guy, a plumber, or an electrician for a problem you have in your home, and to help you get an understanding of the problem and potentially even fix it yourself. So that was the idea. And it's quite innovative because no one was doing that, like a mobile first DIY helpline. And I fundamentally didn't think it was people are interested in that. So I kind of came with a very pessimistic view. And I essentially, my whole hypothesis was, I think people aren't interested at that stage of top of the funnel. I think they're really interested and engaged in it when it's part of their care package, like almost like insurance, once you've solved the meaningful problem for them. So my hypothesis was that where the solution fits in the customer's journey and their need and how people are conditioned to think, it's going to be too expensive to educate them. And this was like, but this is an innovative product. How are you going to get it in the hands of people if you don't educate them? And I generally don't believe in educating people, which is a lot of founders really don't like this idea or concept. They're like, I'm going to educate the market. I'm going to disrupt. And I don't believe that's possible. Or if it is possible, it's too expensive to do. It's just not economically viable. So my whole thinking shifted very differently than anyone else in the business. How can we help people solve a problem? And off the back of helping them solve that problem, delivering value, offer the core proposition. And this was like, it was actually quite remarkable that they had enough mental permeability, enough mental flexibility to accept this paradigm, because it's such an uncomfortable shift. It's like, you want to pivot the whole freaking business when you've been here for a week. It's like, okay, it's great, let's try it. And they're like, okay, great. So what the main thing I changed, interestingly enough, was they were driving mobile app ads on Facebook ads and Google. And all I did was I shifted it from Facebook and Google mobile app to desktop and mobile, but not mobile app. So you didn't have to install it. And I went on Google ads and I looked for all the people who have an immediate problem. People have an immediate plumbing problem, an immediate electrical problem. They need someone to come over and fix it. And then what we did is we took them through a journey. So in the first funnel, they had 5 steps. The second funnel, we had 9 steps. And this is against any advice any conversion rate expert would tell you. They're like, you need less friction, not more friction. And it was very counterintuitive to add more steps, but we had to because of the complexity of shifting from a native mobile app. So what we had to do then is take them to a landing page. They had to fill in a form, which we then replaced with chat and had like a 32% increase in engagement. And then we had to email them a link to go to the App Store to install the app. Then they had to register, and then they had to talk to someone. And people were willing to do it because the offer was really compelling. And the offer was like money back guarantee if you're not happy, or like 30-day insurance. It was like, there was a very compelling message and an incentive to do it. So to cut a long story short, it took about 7 weeks or 6 weeks. And we went from 0 every day, where the support team and the product team and the people who were meant to do the DIY, they're just sitting there, to getting 500 inquiries a day. And that shift meant all of marketing and sales had to stop doing marketing and sales to deal with customer inquiries, to sit, because the delivery team didn't have enough capacity. So then suddenly everyone's all hands on deck. And like suddenly it's a business that's gone from like crickets to there's so much demand. We need to figure out how to harvest this demand and funnel it and understand how to build something people need and want. How do we pivot? And essentially it worked quite well. My hypothesis, it wasn't perfect and we were still quite early. So I'm not like describing as if I built a £1 billion juggernaut here. But what we needed to do was figure out, where does the solution fit? And my hypothesis was, okay, you come and you had a chat with an electrician. He gave you a diagnosis. We send an electrician to fix it. And then after that, by the way, if you have the mobile app and you have any DIY problems, you can just call us and we'll come over and help you if you need, or we'll try and help you solve it yourself so it's cheap. Or maybe we can just help you understand how to get a quote. So it's not one of our tradesmen, it's another tradesman, but you can understand roughly what the price is going to be. So like an advisor objective and perspective. And then that's it. That was like a really great success story where you nail, I'd call it like channel, problem, audience fit. The message, we iterated on the message because we had like 1.5 million keywords. So we had to build like, I can't remember how many landing pages we had. Like, I think we dynamically generated like 35,000 landing pages. So it was hyper personalized, keyword related dynamic landing pages to try and nail that conversion journey. But it wasn't like there was one gross message that we had to iterate. It wasn't like a positioning, like a B2B strategic positioning where you're doing a complex sales, you need to nail it. It was a different type of business where it's more like product-led growth type motion rather than sales-led motion. So that's it. That was the example of that case study.
That does sound insane, especially helping a startup early on that, nothing has been working for so long. And then you make that shift that doesn't make any sense to anyone. And it's still, week by week is going by and nothing's changing. So people are getting even more skeptical. But then that one day that thing happened and it's like, aha, we figured it out. It sounds really crazy. So it was great having you on the show, Oren. Is there any last words you would like to share with founders if they're at the beginning of their journey?
Yeah. Persistently, patiently, and diligently, you're bound to be successful.
I like that. And how can people find more about you or get in
Yeah.
touch with you?
And just drop a follow on the LinkedIn. Look me up on LinkedIn.
All right. Thanks so much, Oren.